Last time, I showed off my work progress on how I create animated Twitch emotes from nothing. This time, I'll voice over a VOD, where I took an already existing emote and made it move. The original artist infos, as well as my own emote commission page, are linked down in the video's description. I hope you enjoy! First thing you see me do here is load up the emote in a Clip Repaint file to separate it into multiple layers and restore any parts of it that may have been blocked or covered up. I can of course never perfectly recreate the original, but I don't need to because these emotes are 112 pixels big, usually viewed at 28 pixels size. Oh, and this Clip Repaint file is 480 pixels, I think. No one is showing that on anymore. I was aiming to separate both foxes into 4 body parts: the head, the body, the arm and the tail, but as I would later find out, I didn't need the tail. There's no definitive rule for how much I actually add to a drawing outside of its boundaries. I just kinda go for what feels right, you know? Usually, I just either try to close off all shapes or extend them until they won't show any sudden cutoffs anymore once they move. To get that cute extra 3D effect, I also separated the muzzle off of the orange fox's face. I didn't do that for the yellow one, but I figured it would work nicely on the orange one. One little detail I struggled a lot on was the blush on both the foxes. On the orange fox it's not as noticeable, but the yellow fox blush, oh boy, that took me a while. When I was done separating layers, I exported them all out into PNGs to preserve their transparency. And then moved on to load up my animation program Moho. In the past, I've already animated a yellow fox tail that wags from side to side for this commissioner, so I figured, hey, why not just make my life easier and use that? So I slapped that on the backs of the foxes. This is quite an important step in animating still images, but you'll have to look a little closer to see what I'm doing, as it's not that visible. You'll have to look out for blue lines. So basically, I draw out a vector shape around the foxes, and then triangulate the shape, which gives me these funky, colorful triangles. I then link up the images with the corresponding triangle mesh, so that if I move one of the triangle's corner points, the image will move along. This is how I let my animation program know where the edges of these otherwise square image files are, or, well, would be if they were vector graphics. Now, because I'm not about to move every single point individually for this, I rig up the whole file with some bones. These bones will apply their movement to whatever corner point is within their area of effect. And if a point is between multiple bones areas of effect, it will automatically calculate where it should go. This, of course, is not flawless, but it provides a good base to work off of. Around here, I ran into some issues, with my initial plan really failing, and me having to come up with some new strategies on how to make these foxes move. For example, the 2 foxes would just be glued together, so I had to separate the 2 foxes into 2 separate bone rigs so I can move them apart properly. Same thing happened with the orange fox's paw and later on with the yellow fox's paw. I had to move it onto a completely separate layer and a completely separate bone rig so I wouldn't pull the entire face down while I was editing it. After some more tweaking and making sure that everything works properly, I finally felt happy with how the orange fox was rigged up. So now it's time to animate, I guess. The animation progress here is a lot of back and forth. You just see me constantly flicker between 2 states and just make sure that the transition between those 2 states works out well. It's not really one thing I can talk a lot about in theory, but it's something I can do a lot in practice and just, I don't know, have an eye for and know what to look for. If I were to actually want this footage to be readable, then I would have to play it in actual speed, but then the YouTube video would end up being like, what, I don't know, an hour long. So yeah, basics here are just focus on one thing, and then add the next thing, and then add the next thing, and hope that altogether it's gonna look good. Trust the process. Here I tried applying a little bit of squash and stretch to the head. As some of you might know, I'm in love with squash and stretch, and if I can, I will squash and stretch because it just makes everything feel a little more alive, less stiff, less like it's one drawing and more like it's many drawings that just have a little bit of inconsistency and wiggliness to them. But in this case, it didn't work out that well, so I ended up scrapping that and just squash and stretch the entire fox instead of just the head. As you can clearly see here, it didn't matter that I couldn't perfectly recreate the one blush on the yellow fox, because for the few frames that you see the other blush, your eye will just autocorrect it for you and just take the information that it has of the one blush that is constantly visible and just apply it to the other blush. Besides, this is 28 by 28 pixels as I mentioned before, so it really doesn't matter, and you know, trying to perfectly recreate what isn't going to be visible at all, or barely visible at all, is just not worth the effort. When it was time to add the yellow arm to the fox, I realized something. In the still image, the yellow fox is holding up or catching the orange fox. But when the orange fox is snuggling like that, the arm would have to travel all the way down and all the way up. Like, the arm would kind of have to hold the entire orange fox, and like, it took me a while to figure out what I'm gonna do here, because I did not take into consideration how the yellow arm is gonna move when I was planning this all out in my head. So yeah, took me a few tries, but I got there in the end. And with that, we're pretty much done. Video over. The whole VOD was 5 hours long, and this snippet specifically was 2 hours, shortened down to like 8 minutes, so the frame rate here is 2000, or over 2000. Yeah, I'm pretty much happy with the result and how everything turned out. If you would like to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments, and see you next time. Oh, and follow my Twitch if you want to see more stuff like this in actual speed. Non-edited. Bye!